My name is Rowan Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how I smiled through my husband's most humiliating betrayal without shedding a single tear. If you told me a year ago that I'd calmly announce my divorce in front of 15 horrified relatives over candied yams, I would have laughed. But I work in a pediatric ER. I know exactly what it looks like when something's dying from the inside out long before anyone else sees the symptoms. My husband thought he could rewrite our marriage without asking me. He thought I'd crumble. He thought wrong. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get to the story. On paper, my life was the definition of unremarkably stable. I work night shifts at a children's hospital, the kind of job that leaves you smelling like hand sanitizer and decorated with cartoon stickers you forgot were stuck to your scrubs. My husband Owen managed a construction firm, all steel-toed boots and project timelines. We'd been married 6 years. We had routines that fit together like well-worn puzzle pieces. Weekday dinners when our schedules aligned. Weekend mornings with our 2 rescue dogs who thought every sound was a personal threat. Sunday pancake competitions where Owen always burned his and I always won, and we both pretended it was close. The kind of boring that felt like safety. The kind of predictable that let me breathe easy after 12-hour shifts filled with crying kids and panicked parents. If you'd asked me back then, I would have called us solid. Maybe a little too comfortable, a little too settled into our separate orbits, but solid. I meant it, too. I didn't need fireworks. I needed someone who showed up, who remembered to pick up dog food without being asked, who didn't make my already exhausting life harder. I thought that's what I had. The cracks didn't announce themselves with fanfare. They started small, almost invisible if you weren't paying attention. But here's the thing about being a nurse, you're always paying attention. You have to be. A kid's breathing pattern changes slightly, a parent's hands start trembling in a specific way, a vitals monitor beeps half a second off rhythm, you notice. You log it. You wait to see if it becomes a pattern. Owen started keeping his phone like it was classified government intel. Not just locked, which it always had been, but actively hidden. Turned face down on every surface. Angled away from me when he scrolled. Tucked into his pocket mid-conversation like it might spontaneously combust if I glanced at the screen. I noticed. I didn't say anything. Not my style. Then came the zoning out. I'd come home from a shift where I'd just saved a choking infant or held a sobbing mother whose kid needed emergency surgery, and I'd be telling Owen about my day while reheating whatever leftovers survived in our fridge. Mid-sentence, his eyes would glaze over. Fork hovering. Brain clearly 3 states away. You good? I asked the first time, exhaustion making my voice flat. He blinked, refocused. Yeah, sorry. Long day. Thing is, people who are just tired don't suddenly develop an allergy to looking you in the eye. It kept happening. Breakfast, dinner, random Tuesday nights folding laundry while some cooking show played in the background. He'd drift off mid-conversation, his hands still moving through the motions but his mind clearly somewhere I wasn't invited. Then he discovered podcasts. Not just any podcasts, very specific podcasts about conscious relationships and emotional expansion and unshackling yourself from outdated relationship models. Suddenly, this man who used to listen to true crime and sports radio was nodding along to some influencer with a suspiciously smooth voice explaining how ownership is just fear wearing a wedding ring. I'd stumble through the door at 2 a.m., covered in the evidence of other people's emergencies, and find him on the couch with his earbuds in, staring at nothing, absorbing this stuff like gospel. He started dropping little conversational grenades into perfectly normal moments. We'd be loading the dishwasher, and out of nowhere, you know, a lot of couples are redefining what connection means these days. I'd close the dishwasher door slowly, turn to look at him. Redefining how? Just being less rigid. Less possessive. He wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I'd go back to wiping down the counter. Noted. Logged. Filed away. Another time, I was half asleep on the couch, barely keeping my eyes open after a brutal shift, and he sent me an article. Actual digital evidence, sent from 6 feet away rather than just talking to me like a normal human. The headline was something about modern love and emotional freedom in marriage. I opened it, skimmed exactly 3 paragraphs of pseudo-spiritual relationship advice clearly written by someone who'd never actually had to negotiate, whose turn it was to clean the bathroom, and set my phone down. Thoughts? He asked, too casually. Several, I said. None of them polite. He laughed. Too loud. Too long. Changed the subject too quickly. See, jealousy is supposed to be this big, ugly, consuming thing. It's supposed to make you irrational, make you grab phones and demand passwords and turn into someone you don't recognize. That's the narrative Owen was clearly banking on. But I'm not wired that way. I don't explode. I observe. I assess. I wait for the full picture to develop before I make my diagnosis. And the picture that was developing? It was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Monogamy is kind of a Western construct if you really think about it, he mentioned one evening, apropos of absolutely nothing, while we were watching some mediocre show about people renovating houses. I muted the TV. Turned to face him fully. Is this going somewhere, Owen? What? No. Just, interesting to think about. Different perspectives. Whose perspective? Just, people's. In general. I unmuted the TV. But I didn't stop watching him in my peripheral vision, the way you watch a patient whose symptoms don't quite add up yet but you know they will. Every new phrase sounded like it came from the same script. Attachment isn't the same as love. True connection means freedom to explore. Jealousy is just fear of losing control. I wanted to ask him, are you studying philosophy or rehearsing excuses? But I already knew the answer. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Every conversation became a minefield of loaded questions and spiritual buzzwords. Every quiet moment felt like him working up to something. Building towards some grand announcement he thought I wasn't ready for. He was wrong about that, too. I knew something was coming. I could feel it the way you feel a storm building before the first drop of rain. The pressure change. The shift in the air. I just didn't know he'd be stupid enough to make his move at Thanksgiving dinner in front of his entire family. Owen's family does Thanksgiving the way some people do religious ceremonies, with reverence, rigidity, and just enough underlying tension to make everyone need a drink by dessert. His mother, Patricia, starts planning the menu in October. Cloth napkins that have to be ironed. China that only comes out twice a year. A centerpiece situation that involves gourds, candles, and what I'm pretty sure is an unreasonable amount of decorative wheat. Everything has its place, its purpose, its tradition. Patricia Hayes doesn't do casual. She does correct. Understood what? That you wanted permission to cheat with better vocabulary? I tilted my head slightly. That you thought if you wrapped it in enough New Age language, I wouldn't notice you'd already made up your mind without me? Someone dropped their fork. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Patricia's voice came out strangled. Owen Michael Hayes, what is she talking about? Mom, it's not, he turned to me, desperation creeping into his eyes. Rowan, you're embarrassing me. I laughed. Actually laughed. Short, sharp, utterly genuine. I'm embarrassing you? I set my napkin down, movements slow and deliberate. You just announced a unilateral decision about our marriage to 15 people over candied yams, and I'm the one embarrassing you? You're making a scene. No, I said, standing up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You made the scene the second you decided our marriage was a democracy where only you got to vote. The table had gone so quiet I could hear Richard's ice cubes shifting in his glass. I looked at Owen, really looked at him, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No heartbreak. Just clarity, sharp and clean and final. You want an open marriage? I said. Great. I want a divorce. Patricia gasped. Actually gasped, hand to chest, like she was in a Victorian novel. Owen stood, knocking his chair back slightly. Rowan, wait, we can talk about this. We could have talked about it months ago, I said. Before you decided I was too rigid, too possessive, too attached to outdated models. Before you planned this announcement like it was some brave act of authenticity instead of just cowardice with a TED Talk soundtrack. I grabbed my purse from the back of my chair. Maya, bless her chaotic soul, raised her wine glass slightly in my direction. Happy Thanksgiving, Rowan. Happy Thanksgiving, Maya. I walked toward the door, Owen's voice following me. Rowan, please, you're overreacting. I turned back one last time. No. I'm reacting exactly right. You just didn't expect me to. And then I left. No yelling. No thrown dishes. No dramatic exit speech. Just quiet, controlled, absolute finality. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of voices. Patricia's shocked crying. Richard muttering something that sounded like knew something was off about that goddamn podcast phase. Maya's barely suppressed laughter. Owen's panicked attempts to control the narrative now that his audience was no longer cooperating. I got in my car, started the engine, and sat there for exactly 30 seconds while my phone lit up with incoming calls. Owen. 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 Patricia. Owen. I blocked his number and drove. Not home. Not to a friend's house. Not to wallow or cry or fall apart the way he probably expected. I drove to the one person who tried to warn me months ago, the one person whose concern I dismissed because I thought I had everything under control. I drove to Theo's apartment. Owen's coworker. Owen's friend. The guy who'd pulled me aside at a company barbecue over the summer and said, carefully, quietly, "Hey, is everything okay with you and Owen?" He's been acting different. The guy I'd assured, with absolute confidence, that we were fine. I pulled into the parking lot of his building and sat there for a moment, watching the light in what I knew was his third-floor window. My phone buzzed again. Patricia this time, probably calling to apologize for her son or beg me to come back or explain that this was all a misunderstanding. I silenced it. Then I got out of the car and went upstairs to find out exactly how long Theo had known what I'd only just confirmed. That my husband wasn't exploring emotional freedom. He was just a cheater who'd found a philosophy that made it sound enlightened. Theo answered his door in sweatpants and a faded college t-shirt, hair sticking up like he'd been running his hands through it, confusion and concern competing for dominance on his face. Rowan? He glanced past me into the hallway like he expected Owen to be lurking somewhere behind me. What, is everything okay? Owen announced an open marriage at Thanksgiving dinner, I said flatly. In front of his entire family. Including his mother, who I'm pretty sure is currently lying down with a cold compress and questioning every parenting decision she's ever made. Theo's expression did something I recognized immediately. That particular wince healthcare workers develop when they know the diagnosis before the test results come back. When they know exactly how bad it's going to be and they have to decide whether to tell you now or wait until you're sitting down. Come in, he said, stepping aside. His apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a 36-year-old project manager who worked too much and had opinions about coffee beans, neat but not obsessive, furniture that matched in a way that suggested intentional adult choices, a bookshelf organized by some system only he understood. The kind of space that felt lived in without being messy. I sat on his couch. He sat in the chair across from me, elbows on his knees, looking at me with an expression that made my stomach tighten. How long have you known? I asked. Known what? Whatever you're about to tell me that's making you look at me like I'm about to get bad news from an oncologist. He exhaled slowly, rubbed his face with both hands. There's someone. From his gym. The air went very still. Her name's Sage, Theo continued, the name coming out like an apology. She's. I don't know what she is. Wellness influencer? Life coach? One of those people who posts inspirational quotes over pictures of themselves doing yoga on a beach. How long? I'm not sure exactly when it started. 3 months, maybe 4. I noticed them talking at the company gym. He paused, choosing his words carefully. At first I thought it was just friendly. Then it became less friendly. I sat very still, hands folded in my lap, breathing measured. Waiting. About 6 weeks ago, Owen and I grabbed drinks after work. He was talking about evolving and growth and all this pseudo-spiritual relationship stuff. Asked me what I thought about open marriages. Theo's jaw tightened. I told him it only works if both people actually want it. He got defensive. Said you were resistant to new ideas and threatened by emotional expansion. Something cold settled in my chest. Not surprise. Not even hurt. Just confirmation. I started paying attention after that, Theo said. Saving things. Screenshots. Messages I saw over his shoulder. Because I knew, he stopped, shook his head. I knew he was building towards something. And I knew when it fell apart, you'd need proof that you weren't crazy. He pulled out his phone, hesitated. Do you want to see them? Yes. He handed me the phone. The first screenshot was a text exchange from 2 weeks ago. Owen's contact photo at the top, him smiling, arms crossed, the picture I'd probably taken at some point when I still thought taking his picture mattered. Owen, missing you. This weekend felt too short. Sage, I know. But we have to be patient. She's not ready yet. Owen, what if she's never ready? What if she can't understand what we have? Sage, then you'll have to decide what your truth is. You can't shrink yourself to fit someone else's limitations. I scrolled to the next one. Owen, told her about the podcast today. She barely reacted. Sage, that's the problem. She doesn't engage. She doesn't want to grow with you. Owen, sometimes I feel like I'm married to a stranger. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Next screenshot. A gym selfie, Sage in sports bra and leggings, Owen shirtless beside her, both of them post-workout glowing and laughing. The caption, when your gym partner becomes your soul partner. Flex bicep sparkles #consciousness #evolution #authentic love. I felt Theo watching me, waiting for a reaction. Keep going, I said. More messages. Owen asking Sage how to introduce open dynamics to a resistant partner. Sage sending him articles, podcast links, recommendations for books with titles like Ethical Sluthood and The New Monogamy. Strategy sessions disguised as philosophical discussions. Sage, the key is framing it as growth, not rejection. You're not leaving her. You're inviting her to expand. Owen, what if she sees it as cheating? Sage, only if she's still operating from a scarcity mindset. We're abundance. We're evolution. I actually laughed at that one. Short, sharp, humorless. There's more, Theo said quietly. The next batch was worse. Late-night messages that blurred the line between emotional affair and something much more concrete. References to last night and next time and the way you taste like freedom. Conversations where Owen called me rigid, closed off, unable to see beyond traditional structures. In one particularly damning exchange, Owen complained that I was too focused on work and emotionally unavailable. I stared at that one longer than the others. I was emotionally unavailable. The pediatric ER nurse who held dying children and traumatized parents. Who came home smelling like hospital and fear and other people's grief. Who was too exhausted to decode philosophical riddles about relationship evolution because I'd spent the last 12 hours keeping actual humans alive. That was emotional unavailability to him. Rowan. Theo's voice was gentle. I'm sorry. I almost told you a dozen times, but I didn't have hard proof, and I thought. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was reading too much into it. You weren't wrong, I said, still scrolling. Still cataloging. Still building the complete picture. The last screenshot was from this morning. Before Thanksgiving dinner. Sage, today's the day? You're really telling her? Owen, during dinner. Public setting. She won't make a scene. And once it's out there, there's no taking it back. Sage, so brave. I'm proud of you. This is your truth. Owen, our truth. I'm doing this for us. I handed the phone back to Theo. How do you feel? He asked. Validated, I said immediately. I'm not crazy. I'm not paranoid. I'm not imaging things. I looked at him directly. I was right about every single thing I noticed. The phone hiding. The zoning out. The podcasts. All of it. You're not devastated? I thought about that for a moment. Checked in with myself the way I do during a shift, quick vital signs assessment, making sure I'm not missing something critical. No, I said finally. I think I already knew. Not the specifics. Not her name or the extent of it. But I knew he'd already left the marriage in every way that mattered. Tonight was just him making it official. Theo nodded slowly. What are you going to do? Nothing tonight. Tonight I'm going to check into a hotel, take a shower that's longer than 3 minutes, and sleep in a bed that doesn't smell like his cologne. I stood up. Tomorrow I'm going to start figuring out the logistics of divorce. Do you need anything? Company? A place to stay? I can. I need you to send me those screenshots, I interrupted. All of them. And if there's anything else you remember, anything he said or did that seemed off, write it down. You're building a case. I'm protecting myself, I corrected. There's a difference. He sent the screenshots while I stood there, my phone buzzing with each incoming file. Evidence. Ammunition. Truth in digital form. Thank you, I said. For saving these. For caring enough to pay attention. I should have told you sooner. No. I surprised myself with how firmly I said it. You did exactly what you should have done. You gave me the information when I needed it, not when it would have just been noise I wasn't ready to hear. I left Theo's apartment with a strange sense of clarity. No tears. No breakdown. No dramatic crisis of faith in humanity or love or marriage. Just relief. Relief that my instincts weren't broken. Relief that the evidence matched the symptoms. Relief that I could stop pretending everything was fine when it clearly, demonstrably wasn't. I checked into a hotel 3 miles from our house. One of those extended stay places that cater to business travelers and people whose lives are temporarily in transition. I asked for a room on a high floor, far from the elevator, facing away from the highway. The room was aggressively neutral. Beige walls. Generic landscape art. A bed with sheets that had been washed 1,000 times and smelled like industrial detergent. It felt like the exact opposite of home. It felt perfect. I took the longest shower of my life, standing under water hot enough to turn my skin pink, washing away the smell of Patricia's house and Owen's betrayal and the performance I'd maintained through dinner. I put on the hotel robe, ordered Thai food that arrived in 40 minutes, and ate it sitting cross-legged on the bed while scrolling through divorce attorneys on my phone. I didn't cry. Didn't spiral. Didn't question my worth or wonder what I could have done differently. I just planned. When my phone buzzed with another call from Owen, I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to it. Rowan, please. Please pick up. We need to talk about this. You can't just walk out in the middle of Thanksgiving and expect. His voice cracked slightly. You embarrassed me. In front of my whole family. Whatever you think happened, whatever you think I did, we can work through it. Just call me back. Please. I deleted it. Blocked his number. Again. More permanently this time. I fell asleep sometime after midnight, cocooned in sheets that smelled like nothing, in a room that held no memories, with the white noise of the heating system drowning out everything else. I woke up at 8 to 17 missed calls from Owen on my work phone, the number I'd forgotten he had. By 9, I was back at our house, letting myself in with my key, preparing to pack a bag with actual clothes since I'd fled Thanksgiving in a dress and tights that were now crumpled in a hotel bathroom. I heard Owen's truck pull into the driveway before I saw him. The front door slammed open hard enough to bounce off the wall. "Are you kidding me right now?" Owen's voice carried through the house, sharp with a rage I'd never heard from him before. "You blocked my number? You won't answer my calls? After what you did last night?" I came down the stairs slowly, overnight bag in hand, completely calm. "What I did?" I repeated. "You humiliated me. In front of my entire family. My mother called me crying at 6 in the morning. Maya's texting me memes about divorce lawyers. My dad told me I'm an idiot and he's not sure he disagrees with you." "Okay," I said. That stopped him. "Okay? That's all you have to say? What would you like me to say, Owen? That I'm sorry for reacting to you blindsiding me with an announcement about our marriage that I never agreed to? We talked about this." "No," I said, enunciating clearly. "You talked. You hinted. You dropped breadcrumbs and expected me to follow you to conclusions you'd already reached without me. That's not conversation. That's manipulation with extra steps." His face was red, hands clenched at his sides. "You're twisting everything. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're so rigid, so unable to see beyond your narrow view of what a relationship should be." "I saw screenshots last night," I interrupted. The color drained from his face so fast I could have tracked his blood pressure dropping. "What?" "Messages. Between you and Sage. The woman from your gym. The one you've been emotionally aligned with while rehearsing speeches about how I'm too possessive." "Rowan. You weren't exploring openness," I said, my voice completely level. "You were rehearsing excuses. Building a philosophical framework to justify cheating. Finding a way to make your affair sound enlightened instead of just sad. I didn't cheat. We never. Please don't insult me by pretending there's a meaningful difference between what you did and what you wanted to do." I hitched my bag higher on my shoulder. "You checked out of this marriage months ago. You just wanted permission to make it official without being the bad guy. That's not." He ran his hands through his hair, frantic. Okay, fine. I ended it. With Sage. Last night, after you left. I told her it was a mistake, that I need to focus on us. How noble. I mean it. We can fix this. Counseling. Whatever you need. I'll delete the podcasts. Owen. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt absolutely nothing. No love. No hate. Just exhausted indifference. I don't want to fix this. I want a divorce. You're not thinking clearly. You're angry. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months, I said. And I'm not angry. I'm done. Rowan, please. I have a meeting with a lawyer at 2, I said, walking past him toward the door. I suggest you find one too. You can't just throw away 6 years. I stopped in the doorway, looked back. I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. I'm just accepting the loss and moving on. His face crumpled. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I'll be back later for more of my things, I said. When you're not here. I walked out. Got in my car. Drove away from the house that no longer felt like home, from the man who no longer felt like my husband, from the life I'd thought was stable and safe and real. The lawyer's office was in a building downtown, all glass and steel and the kind of aggressive professionalism that costs $400 an hour. I walked in at 1:55, gave my name to the receptionist, and sat down to wait. My phone buzzed. Another call from Owen. I silenced it and picked up a magazine I had no intention of reading. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman in a perfectly tailored suit appeared in the waiting area. Rowan Hayes? I stood up. I'm ready, I said. And I was. The divorce lawyer's name was Janet Moreno, and she had the energy of someone who'd heard every story, believed none of the excuses, and kept a running tally of how many times men claimed their affairs were actually misunderstandings. She listened to my timeline without interrupting. Made notes in handwriting so neat it looked like a font. Asked pointed questions about assets, joint accounts, property ownership, debt. Any children? She asked. No. Pets? No. That simplifies things. She leaned back in her chair, studying me over reading glasses that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. You seem remarkably calm for someone whose husband just publicly announced an affair disguised as spiritual evolution. I work in pediatric emergency medicine, I said. I've learned to save my emotional reactions for actual emergencies. She smiled slightly. Fair enough. Here's what you need to know. California is a no-fault divorce state, which means his infidelity doesn't technically matter for the divorce itself. But it matters for everything else: spousal support, asset division, credibility if he tries to fight you on anything. He'll fight, I said with certainty. They always do. She pulled out a packet of forms that looked thick enough to cause actual physical pain. Especially the ones who thought they were being clever. The screenshots you mentioned, forward them to me. Anything else you have? Bank statements. Credit card records. If he's been spending money on her, we need to know. I spent the next hour signing papers, authorizing financial investigations, learning vocabulary words like dissolution and discovery and equitable distribution. By the time I walked out of her office, I had a roadmap. A timeline. A strategy. It felt like the first thing in months that made sense. Owen's spiral started that evening. Owen, please. We need to talk. I ended things with Sage. Completely. It's over. It was a mistake and I see that now. Owen, I know I hurt you. I know I fucked up. But 6 years, Rowan. 6 years. That has to mean something. Owen, you can't just give up on us without even trying. Owen, I'm willing to do the work. Real work. Actual therapy, not just podcasts. Whatever you need. I didn't respond to any of them. The next morning, he showed up at the hospital. Actually walked into the ER, wild-eyed and unshaven, asking the front desk if he could see me. Security escorted him out while I watched from the staff station, feeling nothing except mild annoyance that he'd brought his personal drama into my workplace. My supervisor pulled me aside. You okay? Fine. Soon-to-be ex-husband. It's handled. She nodded knowingly. Let me know if we need to flag his name at the desk. The texts continued. Owen, I'm reading about conscious uncoupling. What if we approach this as growth instead of ending? Owen, I talked to a couples therapist. She has openings next week. Just one session. Please. Owen, you're being vindictive. This isn't like you. Owen, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say. By day 3, he'd moved into what I mentally categorized as the bargaining through philosophy phase. Long, rambling texts about evolution and consciousness and how all relationships are mirrors, and maybe this crisis is actually an invitation to transcend our limitations. I forwarded them to Janet with a single-line email, Exhibit C, Spiritual Gaslighting. Her response came back in under 5 minutes, I've seen worse. Barely. On day 4, Owen showed up at the house again. I'd gone back to pack more clothes, timing it for when I knew he had a work meeting. But he'd clearly skipped it, because his truck was in the driveway and he was sitting on the front steps looking like he'd slept in his car. Rowan. He stood up as I approached, hands raised in supplication. Please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I have nothing to say to you. Then just listen. He moved to block the door, not threatening, just desperate. I ended it with Sage. Completely. I told her it was over, that I made a mistake, that I need to focus on us. There is no us. Don't say that. Please don't say that. His voice cracked. I know I hurt you. I know I went about this the wrong way. But the core of what I was trying to say, about growth, about evolution, that was real. We can still. Owen. I looked at him with the same clinical detachment I used to assess triage priority. You didn't want growth. You wanted permission. You wanted me to agree to let you fuck someone else without calling it cheating. He flinched. That's not. And when you realized I wasn't going to give you that permission, you decided to announce it publicly so I couldn't say no without looking like the villain. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder. That's not evolution. That's just cowardice with a TED Talk soundtrack. I love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of not being the bad guy. You love the version of me that existed in your head who would applaud your brave honesty and thank you for the opportunity to expand our relationship. I met his eyes. But that person doesn't exist. She never did. A car pulled into the driveway behind mine. We both turned. Sage emerged from a white Tesla like a wellness Instagram post come to life, high ponytail, leggings with mesh panels, oversized sweater that probably cost $300 and was marketed as effortlessly chic. She had that particular kind of confidence that comes from never having been genuinely challenged about anything. Owen? She stopped when she saw me, her expression flickering between confusion and something that might have been recognition. What's going on? Owen's face went through several complex emotions in rapid succession: panic, guilt, calculation, more panic. Sage. What are you? You shouldn't be here. You weren't answering my texts. She looked between us, pieces clicking into place. This is her. Rowan? I'm her, I confirmed. Though I prefer the wife he lied to, if we're being specific. Sage's eyes narrowed. Not at me. At Owen. You said you ended things, she said slowly. You told me you needed space to work on yourself. I did. I am. Owen looked like a man trying to defuse two bombs simultaneously while standing in quicksand. It's complicated. What did he tell you? I asked Sage directly. About us. About the marriage. She hesitated, glancing at Owen, who was making frantic head-shaking gestures. The truth, I added. You're already here. Might as well be honest. Something shifted in her expression. Decision made. He said you'd grown apart, Sage said. That you'd both acknowledged the marriage was over but were waiting for the right time to make it official. That you were career-focused and emotionally checked out, and that you'd basically already agreed to conscious uncoupling. Interesting, I said. Since the first I heard about any kind of uncoupling was when he announced it to 15 people over Thanksgiving dinner. Sage's face changed. What? He told me, she turned to Owen. You said she knew. You said you'd been having conversations about opening the relationship for months. We had. Owen's voice climbed desperately. We talked about it. She knew I was exploring new relationship paradigms. Listening to you monologue about podcasts isn't the same as agreeing to let you cheat, I said. I didn't cheat. Sage and our connection is spiritual, it's... Oh my God. Sage's voice went flat. You're one of them. One of what? Owen asked. The spiritual parasites. She said it like a diagnosis. The guys who use consciousness language to manipulate women. Who talk about evolution and authenticity while lying to everyone. She looked at me. I'm sorry. I had no idea. He told me you were on the same page. Clearly we were reading different books, I said. Sage, please, Owen reached for her arm. She stepped back. Don't. I've seen this before. Guys who think they've unlocked some higher truth when really they just want consequences-free cheating with better vocabulary. That's not fair. You lied to me, she interrupted. You told me she was emotionally unavailable and resistant to growth. But she wasn't resistant. She just wasn't interested in being gaslit into accepting your affair. I found myself experiencing something unexpected, respect for Sage. She turned to me. I genuinely didn't know. If I had known you weren't on board, that he was lying to both of us, she shook her head. I'm not that person. I don't do this. I believe you, I said. And surprisingly, I did. Owen looked between us, realizing he was losing control of the narrative. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is why I needed space to explore. This is the freedom you wanted, I interrupted, looking at him with absolute clarity. And this is what it looks like. No wife to manage your image. No partner to blame for your limitations. Just you and the consequences of your choices. Rowan. I'm packing my things, I said. You two figure out whatever this is without me. I walked past both of them into the house that would soon be the house where my marriage ended, instead of home. Packed essentials into 3 large suitcases, clothes, toiletries, my favorite books, the coffee maker Owen never learned how to use properly, photographs from before we met that had nothing to do with him. When I came back outside, Sage was gone. Owen was sitting on the steps again, head in his hands. This isn't how it was supposed to go, he said quietly. No, I agreed. You were supposed to announce your evolved consciousness. I was supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to expand beyond my limitations, and we were all supposed to live in some poly paradise where nobody's feelings mattered except yours. That's not. I'll be out completely by the end of the month, I said. My lawyer will be in touch about asset division. Asset division, he repeated hollowly. We're really doing this. We already did it. You did it, specifically, the second you decided I was an obstacle instead of a partner. I loaded my car while he watched, silent and shell-shocked. The rental I'd found was a furnished studio in a building that catered to medical residents and traveling nurses, small, clean, temporary, perfect. It had a Murphy bed, a kitchenette the size of a closet, and a window that overlooked a parking lot. It felt like sanctuary. That first night, I made instant ramen in a pot I'd taken from our kitchen. Ate it sitting cross-legged on the Murphy bed, watching some mindless reality show on my laptop. No podcasts playing in the background. No lectures about consciousness. No careful monitoring of Owen's mood to gauge how the evening would go. Just silence. Blessed, uncomplicated silence. My phone buzzed. Owen, I'm sorry. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I never meant to hurt you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed a response. I know you didn't mean to. That's the problem. You thought you could evolve past basic decency and call it growth. Stop texting me. Talk to your lawyer. I blocked his number on this phone too. Over the next week, I heard through mutual friends that Owen was having what someone generously called a hard time. He'd cried at work during a team meeting. Sent long, philosophical emails to his manager about needing space to process. Tried to recruit coworkers to his side, explaining how Rowan was being rigid and unforgiving. Most people ignored him. Maya, bless her chaotic heart, sent me a screenshot of a text Owen had sent her. I just wanted to grow. Why is everyone acting like I'm a monster? Her response, because you announced an affair at Thanksgiving and expected applause, you absolute walnut. I laughed for the first time in days. The anger I'd expected never came. No rage. No betrayal-fueled fury. No desire for revenge. Just clarity. Clarity that the man I'd married either never existed or had been replaced somewhere along the way by someone who thought personal growth meant freedom from accountability. Clarity that I'd stayed longer than I should have because I kept thinking the next conversation would be the one where he finally understood. Clarity that understanding wasn't coming. That it never would. And clarity that I was okay with that. Better than okay. I was free. Theo texted me on a Wednesday, coffee? I promise not to discuss he who shall not be named unless you want to. I met him at a cafe near the hospital, one of those aggressively hipster places with Edison bulbs and reclaimed wood that served lattes with foam are too pretty to drink. It was the kind of place Owen would have loved 3 months ago, back when he was still collecting aesthetic experiences to post about. The thought passed through my mind without leaving a mark. Progress. You look good, Theo said when I sat down, and he sounded surprised. I've been sleeping, I said. Turns out 8 hours without someone's meditation alarm going off at 5 a.m. does wonders for your complexion. He laughed. Pushed a latte across the table. Oat milk, right? You remembered. I pay attention. He wrapped his hands around his own cup, black coffee, no sugar, the drink of someone who'd given up on joy and accepted caffeine as pure utility. How's the new place? Small. Quiet. Mine. I took a sip of the latte, which tasted like cinnamon and expensive decisions. The woman downstairs is a NICU nurse. We bonded over hospital horror stories and the shared understanding that sleep is sacred. No podcasts bleeding through the walls. Not a single consciousness lecture in sight. We talked about work, his upcoming project deadline, my recent shift where a kid came in having swallowed a Lego Yoda and was more upset about losing it than the actual medical emergency. Normal conversation. Easy. The kind of talk that doesn't require decoding or translating or wondering what's really being said. I heard from Maya, Theo said carefully. She mentioned Owen's been struggling. Define struggling. Calling her at odd hours. Sending essays about betrayal and spiritual warfare. Asked if she thought you and I were, he stopped, uncomfortable. Were what? Together. Like, romantically. I blinked. That's delusional even for him. Grief makes people creative, Theo said diplomatically. That's not grief. That's narcissism with a thesaurus. He smiled, but it faded quickly. I'm worried he might. Rowan. The voice came from behind me, sharp and too loud for the space. I saw Theo's face change first. The way his eyes went past me to something over my shoulder, the way his posture shifted from relaxed to alert in the space of a heartbeat. I turned. Owen stood 3 feet away, and he looked like he'd aged a year in 2 weeks. Unshaven. Eyes red-rimmed and wild. Wearing the same hoodie he'd had on the last time I saw him, now wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Or hadn't slept at all. What are you doing here? He demanded. Having coffee, I said evenly. What are you doing here? I saw your car. He looked at Theo, and something ugly crossed his face. Of course. Of course it's him. Owen, Theo started. How long? Owen's voice was climbing, drawing looks from other tables. How long has this been going on? I felt that particular kind of calm that settles over me during emergencies. The part of my brain that triages, prioritizes, stays functional while everything else burns. There's nothing going on, I said. We're having coffee. Like friends do. Friends. He laughed, harsh and broken. Right. Friends. Is that what you're calling it? Owen, you need to leave, Theo said, standing up. Not aggressive, just present. Solid. Don't tell me what to do. This is between me and my wife. I'm not your wife, I said clearly. I filed for divorce. You were served papers. Papers you had drawn up while you were fucking my best friend. The cafe went very quiet. That's not what's happening, Theo said, voice level but firm. You're having a breakdown in public and you need to. Owen shoved him. Not hard. Not violently. But enough to make Theo stumble back a step, enough to knock over his chair, enough to make every person in the cafe stop pretending not to watch. Owen. I stood up. Stop. You destroyed everything. He was shouting now, gesturing wildly. I was trying to grow, to evolve, and you couldn't handle it. So you what, found someone else? Moved on before the marriage was even over? The marriage was over the second you started lying to me about Sage, I said. I told you the truth. You told me a philosophy lecture disguised as truth. You announced an open marriage I never agreed to and expected me to just accept it because you framed it as evolution. I gave you freedom. You gave yourself permission to cheat and tried to make me complicit. A barista appeared at the edge of my vision, phone in hand. Sir, I'm calling the police. You need to leave. This is a private conversation. This is a public disturbance, the barista said calmly. Leave now or wait for the cops. Your choice. Owen looked around at the cafe full of people staring at him, some concerned, some uncomfortable, several actively filming on their phones. The reality of where he was, what he was doing, seemed to penetrate the fog of whatever breakdown he was having. Rowan, please. His voice cracked. Please, we can fix this. Just tell me what you need. I need you to leave me alone, I said. Not cruel. Just true. But I love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of being loved without having to actually consider anyone's needs but your own. 2 police officers walked in before he could respond. The barista must have called while Owen was still shouting. Someone here causing problems? The older officer asked, gaze landing on Owen with the practiced assessment of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He assaulted my friend, I said. Shoved him. And he's been harassing me despite being asked to leave multiple times. Owen's face crumpled. I didn't, that's not. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us, the officer said. I just wanted to talk to my wife. Your soon-to-be ex-wife, I corrected. Who you're currently harassing in public. The officers escorted Owen out while he protested about consciousness and spiritual persecution and how I was weaponizing the patriarchy against him. Several cafe patrons had their phones out, capturing every moment for whatever social media platform would appreciate the drama most. When the door closed behind them, the cafe stayed quiet for another beat. Then everyone went back to their laptops and conversations like nothing had happened, because this was Los Angeles and public breakdowns barely registered as entertainment anymore. Theo righted his chair, sat back down. You okay? Surprisingly, yes. I sat too, hands steady on my coffee cup. You? I've been shoved harder by middle schoolers playing basketball. He rubbed his shoulder anyway. Though I'll probably feel it tomorrow. Do you want to press charges? Do you? I thought about it. Really considered it. Owen being arrested, having to explain to his employer, the public record, the consequences. No, I said finally. I just want distance. The older officer came back inside, notebook in hand. We're not arresting him. He's cooperative now, mostly just crying. But we documented the incident. If he contacts either of you again, call us immediately. Here's the report number. I took the card he offered. Thank you. He mentioned you're going through a divorce? Yes. Give this number to your lawyer. Events like this can be relevant for restraining orders if it escalates. After the officer left, Theo and I sat in silence for a moment. That was disturbing, he said finally. That was expected, I corrected. He's been losing control incrementally. This was just the visible collapse. My phone rang an hour later. Patricia. I considered not answering. But something made me pick up. Rowan. Her voice was strained. I heard about what happened. The cafe. Owen's father and I, were mortified. It's not your fault. Isn't it? She sounded genuinely distraught. We raised him. We must have missed something. Some sign that he'd become this. Patricia. He lied to us too, she continued. About everything. About you agreeing to the open marriage. About Sage. About his intentions. We thought, she paused, gathering herself. We thought you were being unfair. Rigid. We believed him when he said you couldn't handle his growth. I closed my eyes. I know. I'm so sorry. For everything. For believing him. For that awful dinner. For not seeing what he was doing until it was too late. What are you going to do? I asked. We told him he's not welcome home until he gets professional help. Real help. Not podcasts or life coaches. Actual therapy. Her voice hardened. And we told him that if he contacts you again, we won't be paying for his lawyer anymore. That surprised me. Patricia. You're still family to me, she said firmly. Even if my son is too foolish to deserve you. And family doesn't terrorize each other in coffee shops. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, processing. Owen's parents had disowned him. Or at least, put conditions on their relationship that Owen's ego probably couldn't handle. The people who'd raised him, who'd excused his behavior, who'd provided the safety net that let him feel consequence-free, they'd withdrawn support. That would shake him harder than anything I could do. 3 weeks later, I sat in Janet's office signing the final divorce papers. Congratulations, she said, sliding the decree across the desk. You're officially unmarried. That feels like a weird thing to congratulate someone for. Trust me, you earned it. She leaned back. He tried to fight the asset division until his lawyer told him he had no case. Tried to claim emotional distress. His attorney dropped him after the cafe incident went viral on TikTok. It went viral? Trending under hashtag spiritual gaslighting and hashtag conscious uncouple fail. She pulled up her phone, showed me. Someone made a remix of him shouting about evolution with EDM beats. I watched 30 seconds of Owen's meltdown set to dubstep and felt absolutely nothing. He settled for exactly what we offered initially, Janet continued. You get the house, he gets his truck and half the savings. Clean split. What about? The dogs were registered in your name. They're yours. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding my breath until it released. Thank you. Thank your ex for being a walking case study in how not to handle divorce. She stood, offered her hand. Good luck, Rowan. Try to pick better next time. I went to the house one last time the following Saturday. Owen had moved out completely. I'd timed it specifically for when I knew he'd be gone, confirmed through Maya that he'd taken his last box of consciousness journals and manifestation crystals. The place felt empty. Not sad, just neutral. Like a stage after the play ended and the actors went home. I walked through rooms that used to mean something. The kitchen where we'd cooked together in the early days. The living room where we'd watched movies, back when Owen could sit through a narrative without pausing to discuss the patriarchal implications of the plot. The bedroom where I'd slept next to someone who was slowly becoming a stranger. I packed my remaining things into boxes. Books. Kitchen supplies. The framed photo of my parents. The vintage record player I'd bought myself for my 30th birthday. I left behind anything that felt contaminated by his pseudo-spiritual phase. The meditation cushions. The crystals arranged on the windowsill. The stack of books with titles like Radical Honesty and More Than Two. I was loading the last box into my car when a neighbor I barely knew, Margaret, maybe? Martha, came over. Heard you're selling, she said. Listed it yesterday. That's a shame. You two seemed so happy. We seemed a lot of things, I said neutrally. She nodded knowingly. My first husband seemed successful until the IRS audit. Appearances are just auditions for reality. I liked that. I'll remember that. The house I bought was exactly half the size of the one I'd shared with Owen. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that was small but functional. It was a 1940s bungalow that had been recently renovated, all original hardwood and built-in shelving and windows that actually opened. It was 12 minutes from the hospital. Walking distance to a coffee shop that didn't serve foam art. In a neighborhood where people mostly kept to themselves but weren't unfriendly. It was mine. I moved in on a Thursday. Spent Friday arranging furniture and hanging curtains. On Saturday, I sat on my new back porch with coffee and a book, listening to birds instead of lectures about consciousness. My phone didn't ring. No texts demanding my attention. No podcasts bleeding through walls. Just quiet. Somewhere in the city, Owen was probably spiraling. Probably crafting new narratives about betrayal and spiritual warfare. Probably finding new communities online where his version of events would be validated and my boundaries would be reframed as toxicity. I didn't know. I didn't care. Friends of friends whispered about his downfall, how he'd lost weight, how he'd quit his job to find himself, how he'd moved to Portland or Austin or some other city where failed tech bros went to reinvent themselves as something artisanal. I nodded when people told me these things, made appropriate sounds of acknowledgement, and then let the information slide off me like water. He wasn't my responsibility anymore. He wasn't my problem. He was just a man I used to know, who'd briefly convinced himself that growth meant freedom from accountability, and who discovered too late that evolution requires more than vocabulary. I finished my coffee. Opened my book. Read 3 chapters without interruption. In the distance, a dog barked. A car drove past. Life happened the way it always does, indifferent to drama, continuing regardless. And for the first time in months, I breathed freely. Deeply. Completely. I was home. 3 months after the divorce finalized, I developed a routine that would have bored Owen to tears. I woke up at 6 without an alarm. Made coffee in the French press I'd bought specifically because Owen always said French press was performative and elitist. Sat on my back porch even when it was cold, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sky shift from dark to light while the neighborhood slowly came alive around me. I went to work. Came home. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I watched television shows with no deeper meaning. Sometimes I just sat in silence, doing absolutely nothing, and it felt radical. No podcasts analyzing my choices. No lectures about potential I wasn't living up to. No careful monitoring of someone else's mood to gauge how my evening would go. Just peace. The kind of bone-deep, uncomplicated peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing until I found it again. "You seem different," my supervisor said one day, catching me humming while restocking a supply cart. Different how? Lighter. She studied me with the particular intensity of someone who'd worked in emergency medicine long enough to recognize when people were carrying weight they shouldn't. Like you're not bracing for impact anymore. I'm not, I realized. There's nothing to brace for. Maya came over for dinner on a Tuesday, bringing wine and gossip and the kind of chaotic energy that used to exhaust me but now felt refreshing in small doses. "Owen's in Austin," she announced, pouring herself a generous glass of red. "Living in some commune situation with a bunch of other conscious entrepreneurs." "Good for him," I said, and meant it. "You don't want details?" "Not even a little." She grinned. "God, I love who you've become." Pre-divorce Rowan would have asked follow-up questions and pretended not to care. Pre-divorce Rowan was exhausting. She really was. Maya raised her glass. To post-divorce Rowan, who gives exactly 0 fucks and looks better for it. We clinked glasses. Later, after Maya left, I sat on my couch with my laptop, scrolling mindlessly through streaming options. My phone buzzed. "Theo, coffee tomorrow?" I promise no drama, no exes, no public meltdowns. Me, setting the bar pretty low there. Theo, after the last few months, low bars feel appropriate. Me, fair. Same place? Theo, meet you at 10. I showed up at 9:55, ordered my oat milk latte, and claimed a table in the corner where sunlight streamed through the window and made patterns on the reclaimed wood. Theo arrived exactly on time, because he was the kind of person who considered punctuality a basic courtesy rather than an achievement worth announcing. "You look good," he said, sitting down. "You said that last time." "It's still true." He wrapped his hands around his black coffee. "How's the new place?" Perfect. Small. Mine. No spiritual parasites in a 5-mile radius. He laughed. That's a very specific requirement. I've earned specificity. We talked about nothing important. His work project that was somehow both ahead of schedule and completely disorganized. My upcoming shift schedule that had me working Christmas Eve but off for New Year's. The weather. A movie he'd seen. A restaurant I wanted to try. Normal conversation. Easy. The kind that doesn't require translation or careful parsing for hidden meanings. Can I ask you something? Theo said eventually. Sure. When did you know? That it was really over? I thought about that. Thanksgiving dinner. The second he said, we're in an open marriage, like it was a done deal. Because I realized he'd made a unilateral decision and just expected me to follow along. I stirred my latte. But honestly, I think I knew before that. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet. What were the signs? All of them. I smiled slightly. The podcasts. The new vocabulary. The way he'd zone out mid-conversation like I was boring him. How he started framing every disagreement as me being resistant to growth. I paused. The way he started hiding his phone. I noticed that too, Theo admitted. The phone thing. He used to just leave it on tables, answer texts in front of people. Then suddenly it was always face down, always in his pocket. Classic tell. Very basic. Like, cheating husband 101. He shook his head. I kept thinking I was reading too much into it. That maybe he just wanted privacy. Privacy and secrecy are different things, I said. Privacy is healthy boundaries. Secrecy is hiding evidence. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between the divorce filing and the public meltdown. I took a sip of coffee. Nothing clarifies your thinking like watching your ex-husband shove your friend in a cafe while shouting about spiritual warfare. That was a very specific kind of clarity. The best kind. Undeniable. Documented. Trending on TikTok with EDM remixes. We both laughed. I'm glad you're okay, Theo said after a moment, his voice shifting to something more serious. I was worried. After everything. I'm better than okay, I said honestly. I'm free. That's not the freedom Owen was chasing. No. His freedom was about escaping accountability. Mine is about escaping him. I met Theo's eyes. Turns out those are very different things. Something shifted in the air between us. Not dramatic. Not sudden. Just present. A door opening somewhere, a possibility acknowledged without being forced. Rowan, he started. Don't, I said gently. Not yet. Not while the divorce is still fresh. Not while I'm still figuring out who I am without someone else's narrative running in the background. He nodded slowly. But maybe eventually? Maybe eventually, I agreed. If we're both still interested. If it makes sense. If it's something real instead of just rebound proximity. That's very mature of you. I'm very tired of being immature, I said. Owen got 3 years of me trying to be cool with things I wasn't cool with. The next person gets the version who actually says what she means. I like that version. She's still getting used to existing, I admitted. But she's growing on me. We finished our coffees. Made plans to do this again next week. Hugged goodbye in the parking lot, friendly, warm, uncomplicated. I drove home through streets I was starting to know by heart, to a house that smelled like my candles and my choices and nobody else's opinions. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and my journal, an actual paper journal, not a manifestation workbook or consciousness tracking log, just blank pages for whatever thoughts I wanted to keep. I wrote about signs I'd noticed but didn't voice. How Owen had started using "we" to describe decisions he'd made alone. How he'd reframed every boundary I set as a limitation on his growth. How he'd built an entire philosophy around the idea that his desires were spiritual evolution and my resistance was fear-based patriarchal conditioning. I wrote about how calmly I'd left. How I'd smiled at his family even while my world shifted beneath me. How I'd collected evidence and filed papers and maintained composure through every escalation. I wrote about watching him collapse without an audience. How manipulation requires someone to manipulate. How his grand narrative about consciousness and evolution had fallen apart the moment people stopped believing it. And I wrote about freedom. Real freedom. The kind that isn't about escaping rules or rejecting limitations or finding loopholes in commitment. The kind that comes from choosing yourself over someone else's convenient fiction. The kind that tastes like quiet mornings and unopinionated coffee and nights where nobody's mood determines your emotional weather. My phone buzzed. Maya, Owen's new girlfriend, posted a selfie with him. She's dressed like Sage 2.0. Matching workout gear, consciousness captions, everything. Should I send you the link? Me, no. I genuinely don't care. Maya, that's growth, baby. I smiled, closed my journal, and went inside. During Thanksgiving dinner, my husband declared we were in an open marriage. I smiled without fear. Without hesitation. Without ever needing to look back. I left that dinner with my dignity intact and my future unwritten. I left the marriage with my peace reclaimed and my boundaries reinforced. I left the chaos behind and walked into a life where love doesn't require loopholes, where growth doesn't mean abandoning everyone who holds you accountable, where freedom is measured in quiet mornings rather than escaped commitments. Sometimes the most powerful ending is quiet indifference. Sometimes the most radical act is simply refusing to participate in someone else's drama. Sometimes walking away isn't the end of a marriage, it's the beginning of a life. And sometimes, the woman who sits calmly at Thanksgiving dinner while her world implodes is the same woman who builds something beautiful from the ruins. Not because she's strong. Not because she's evolved. But because she finally understood that the only person whose growth she was responsible for was her own. I poured another glass of wine. Turned on music, something instrumental and uncomplicated. Sat in my living room in my house with my peace and my hard-won clarity. Outside, the neighborhood settled into evening. Dogs barked. Cars pulled into driveways. Life continued the way it always does, indifferent to drama, moving forward regardless. And I moved with it. Free. Whole. Home. 1 year later. The hospital cafeteria served terrible coffee, but I'd long since stopped caring about things like coffee quality when the conversation was good. Theo sat across from me, tie loosened, looking tired in the way everyone looks tired at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday in the middle of a busy work week. My mother asked about you, he said. That's terrifying. She wants to know if you're coming to Christmas dinner. Are we at the meeting parents stage? I asked, raising an eyebrow. We're at the my mother won't stop asking and I ran out of polite deflection stage. We'd been carefully, slowly, deliberately dating for 4 months. Actual dating, dinners, movies, conversations that went nowhere important and meant everything anyway. No rushing. No performing. No grand narratives about consciousness or evolution. Just, us. Whatever that meant. Whatever it was becoming. I'll think about it, I said. That's politicians speak for no. That's, I'm still figuring out what normal pacing looks like, speak. He smiled. Fair enough. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Guess who just got engaged? T.O. Sage 2.0. I showed Theo the message. Quick turnaround, he observed. Predictable turnaround, I corrected. He needs someone to validate his narrative. Might as well make it permanent. You really don't care, do you? I really don't. And it was true. Owen existed somewhere in my past the way high school exists, something that happened, something that shaped me, something I'd learned from and moved beyond. He's living his truth. I'm living mine. And our truths are incompatible, which is exactly how it should be. That's very evolved of you. Please never use that word around me again. He laughed. Noted. Later, driving home through familiar streets to my small perfect house, I thought about the version of myself who'd sat at Thanksgiving dinner and smiled through the announcement that should have shattered her. She'd been stronger than she knew. Braver than she felt. More ready than she realized. And she'd walked away from a man who confused vocabulary with wisdom, who mistook selfishness for spirituality, who thought growth meant freedom from consequences. She'd walked away. And she'd walked into this, quiet evenings, uncomplicated mornings, relationships built on actual communication rather than philosophical performance art. I pulled into my driveway. Sat for a moment, engine off, looking at my house. My home. My life. My freedom. And I smiled. Not the careful, controlled smile from Thanksgiving dinner. But a real one. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and being perfectly content with that answer. I was Rowan Hayes. ER nurse. Dog owner. Ex-wife. Coffee enthusiast. Someone's maybe girlfriend if Christmas dinner went well. Someone who'd learned that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And sometimes, indifference is exactly the happy ending you need.